Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. The People's Voice podcast is an investigative news podcast, which I'm dedicated to covering stories and social issues that are often overlooked and sometimes buried by mainstream media. The purpose of the podcast has always been to shed light on these important topics, and then I try to offer some insightful analysis, recommendations, and then actionable solutions to some of the issues that I discuss on the podcast. The podcast can be heard each and every Friday, which is heard on all podcast platforms. And then in addition, we also put a video out on YouTube as well for those who would like to watch the podcast. But in any event, as we always say, welcome and welcome to the People's Voice podcast. So today, I want to get into the topic regarding crime statistics here in the United States. And this is a heavy topic because I should say a heavily reported topic here in the last couple of weeks, because there has been a lot of conversation around Washington, D.C. And President Trump has, I don't know if he's enacted or proposed, possibly taking over or at least having some of the National Guard and other armed forces basically become the police of Washington, D.C. And a lot of his argument behind doing this is that crime is out of control, especially in D.C., and it needs to be gathered and corralled. On the flip side of that, many people, including the mayor of D.C., has argued that, well, crime is not out of control. As a matter of fact, crime has decreased substantially over the last few years. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit today. Not so much just in Washington, D.C., but throughout the country as well, because for those who may not know, crime throughout the country has been on a steady decrease since the pandemic years. And so I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into some of the reasons why that's occurring, where it's occurring, and then, kind of close out from there. But today I want to talk about crime statistics, crime statistic reporting here in the United States. And so in order to do that, there was recently a report that just came out that was issued by the FBI. FBI came out with their crime statistic reporting about maybe a week or so ago. And in that reporting, they've listed a number of, what I would consider to be wins in terms of crime. Reading here directly from the report, and those of you who are watching the YouTube, you can see this. It says that the FBI releases 2024 reported crimes in the nation's statistics. It says the FBI released detailed data on over 14 criminal offenses for 2024. And it says that this information is from participating law enforcement agencies, and I want you to keep that in mind when I talk a little bit more about that. This crime reporting has been provided by participating law enforcement agencies, which cover more than 16,000 state, county, city, university, colleges, tribal agencies. And it says that this reporting covers about 95% of the United States population. But what I really wanted to get into was just some of the numbers that they have reported. And this is up until, this is as of 2024. So it says that in terms of their reporting, in 2024, they said that they saw a national violent crime decrease of about 4.5% in 2024 compared to 2023. It goes on to say that murder and manslaughter, murder and non-negligent manslaughter cases decreased about 14, almost 15%, 14.9% compared to 2023. It says that the number of rape cases also were decreased. Again, reported rape cases, aggravated assaults decrease, and then also robbery showed an estimated decrease of about 8.9% nationally. So when I saw these numbers, I'm like, okay, well, this is not just a Washington, D.C. thing. This is clearly a nationwide thing, at least the agencies that have reported it. But why is this occurring, right? Because I'm like, there has to be, something more to it. And it's a combination of a number of things. First off, I was reading a report from, what was this from? This was from the Council on Criminal Justice. Council on Criminal Justice, the CCJ. And they did some reporting about this as well, in terms of their mid-year review. And in there, they get a little bit more granular, at least in terms of my opinion, in terms of not only just reporting the crimes, but also the declines. But in addition, they kind of give the periods to where those numbers have started to decline. So, for instance, they have a graph here, and again, those of you who watch YouTube, you can see this. So they have a graph here. For instance, it says Figure 1, and it shows the percentage change in violent crimes or violent offenses from January 2019 to June 2025. So they've already gone halfway into this year. And in that, they show something very similar to what was reported from the FBI crime statistics. They show that homicides were 14% lower in the first half of 2025 compared to the first half of 2019. And then it goes on to show a decrease in the number of aggravated assault cases, or at least reports. Gun assaults were down. Now, again, gun assaults peaked in 2021 and 2022. Sexual assault continues to decrease, domestic violence, and then carjacking, which, for those who may remember, especially, during the pandemic and right after, that 2021 going into 2022, those numbers had spiked. And carjackings had increased, like, for instance, in 2022 by almost 105%. But on their site, they did a great job in terms of detailing the different types of crimes and what those decreases and increases or decreases have looked like since 2019. I give you that because also on their site, not only did they provide that, but they also provide some assumptions. I don't want to say facts, but assumptions on why this has occurred. And one of those things that they talk about is they talked about a theory, which was called and I want to make sure I get this right. They gave a list of possible explanations. And it's about, 7, 8 explanations that they give possibly to why crime has decreased since the pandemic. Now, keep in mind, a lot of the reporting that's going on in DC and in other cities across the country where they say crime is down, they're really looking at stats from, 2020 until now. But in this report from the CCJ, they give these explanations, and one of these explanations, well, all of them are, I think, are legitimate, but the first one that they talked about was a theory which is called routine activity theory, which I hadn't heard of before, but it completely makes sense. So one of the reasons why they believe reporting is showing, crime reports are showing a decrease, or crime statistics are showing a decrease, is because of this theory, which is called routine activity theory, which, and I'm reading directly from the site, it says a routine activity theory argues that crime stems from combination of a motivated offender, a suitable target, and the absence of capable guardians. It goes on to say early in the pandemic, in addition to dealing with the same economic stresses and anxieties that affected the entire population, young men in high crime neighborhoods, many of whom have experienced high levels of trauma, were also forced to remain in close proximity to people with whom they had serious and unresolved disputes with. It goes on to say that, moreover, schools were closed and local government and service providers in many cities were operating at reduced capacity, which removed critical support, and then which in turn increased the risk of committing crimes and being victimized. And it goes on to say some members felt strongly that this theory could be explained in the homicide spike that began in 2020. And I thought that was very important to point out because, one thing that may not be talked about often, because when you hear about these murders are going on, and sometimes the assumption is, well, these murders are occurring in areas where there's gang violence, and this is why we need to have interventions in gangs. And quite honestly, a lot, and you can research this yourself, but there's plenty of data that shows that, especially when you talk about murder and homicide, those are typically crimes of passion. And the reason I was highlighting this routine activity theory is because when murder specifically and homicide occur, it usually occurs with people that are known to each other. So as it says here, those that live in close proximity. Now, I'm not saying, clearly, we all know that there are murders that occur with, unfortunately, people going to schools and shopping malls and things happen. But typically, murder and homicide occurs amongst those who are familiar with one another, because those are crimes of passion. So in this theory, this routine activity theory, they're basically attributing that one of the reasons why you're seeing a decrease, at least in homicides and murders, is because people are no longer in close proximity, because of the end of the pandemic has allowed, people to, again, space out, to get out of those neighborhoods. You're starting to see, some programs come back into effect, especially in tough neighborhoods, in terms of violence intervention programs and other after school and also community programs that keep these individuals active, and also keeping them, from not in such close proximity that they can potentially become violent towards one another. So that's just one of the explanations, and there's a ton of explanations, and I'll go through a few more before I close out here. But I thought that one was very poignant. Another reason that some have theorized that crime statistics are showing a decrease is because of the way that crime statistics are reported. Matter of fact, there was a story done on this in D.C. In D.C., there was a police commander who was suspended, and at the time that he got suspended, he basically accused the police department of changing crime statistics. And they interviewed the local NBC station in D.C., Washington, D.C., interviewed the head of the union. And he talked about this. And I want to play this piece because this is important. If this is occurring in D.C., then I have to assume that this is occurring in major cities and smaller cities throughout the country, which, not saying that's the reason, but can contribute to why you may see such steep declines in some of the statistics in terms of crime. So let me play this from Washington, D.C. 4 in NBC4 in D.C., and then I'll go on from there. But listen to this.
Chairman Greg Pemberton laid it all on the table.
When our members respond to the scene of a felony offense where there is a victim reporting that a felony occurred, inevitably there will be a lieutenant or a captain that will show up on that scene and direct those members to take a report for a lesser offense. So instead of taking a report for a shooting or a stabbing or a carjacking, they will order that officer to take a report for a theft or an injured person to the hospital or a felony assault, which is not the same type of classification.
Greg?
And I'm stopping it there. So now, one might say, well, why would someone do that? Well, what's the purpose of that? Well, keep in mind, all of these departments in these cities were rewarded for in some type of financial compensation, whether that's getting new residents to move in or other incentives to show that crime, or getting businesses to invest to show that crime is decreasing. So when you begin to report certain crimes that occur and in a sort of way dilute what that crime was, it clearly will make your statistics look a lot better. And then those who are interested in moving to those cities or staying in those cities, and then obviously there are usually bonuses attached to certain certain departments or police departments or municipalities for crime reduction and things of that nature. Now it becomes a money play, and sometimes this can contribute to what you're seeing in terms of lower statistics as well.
All I'm doing is presenting the facts.
Again, I'm just giving you different scenarios of what's occurring. Last but not least, there has been some reporting as well saying that the change in tactics have played a role in some of the decrease in the crime statistics, in terms of the decrease that you've seen since the pandemic. Matter of fact, there was a story about this on CBS News recently where they talked about the drop in crime. And let me play this from CBS News, and then we'll close out from there, where they theorized what some of the reasons why crime has decreased over the last couple of years. So.
Enforcement agency is doing different things, but when I've talked to chiefs of police, sheriffs around the country, what they say is their investment in community programs. There are violence interrupter programs in LA, in New York. The police departments there really feel like those have benefited. And then in the middle of the country, leaning on technology to help police target where policing needs to happen in their communities. So that's with automated license plate readers, drones increasingly in use, and police really like those. And they've seen these drops in crime in San Francisco, but also in the middle of the country.
And again, these are a combination of things that are believed to be working, or at least a combination of things that are creating the decline in crime in the United States over the last few years since the pandemic. But, here's the bottom line to this. These crime is declining, right? So I wanted to highlight this because, again, as I started off, President Trump said he wants to take over D.C. because of the crime. The D.C. mayor says, well, we're doing a great job with crime. But the crime drops are nationwide, not just in D.C., but through many cities and towns throughout. And a lot of it had to do with the pandemic. The question is, will this trend continue? And that's where everything is up in the air. Now, there are recommendations on how this trend can continue to go in the right direction, in terms of, reinvestment, in terms of violence intervention programs, in terms of, reduced gun access, more surveillance and technology. But in any event, decrease in crime is not just a one trigger solution. It takes a multitude of things, and I want to make sure that I communicate that, because I've seen those who are in support of Donald Trump and the government sending in the troops to DC to, turn down, to reduce the crime that he says is prevalent in DC. And it's not just a one trick pony.
All I'm doing is presenting the facts.
But that's what I want to talk about today. Like I said, I saw this story and I said, well, let me investigate what's going on, because those are some huge drops in those numbers. But, this is an ongoing story. I'm sure that will resurface again sometime during the year. So I'll stay on top of it, as I know you will as well. But that is my time for today. If you want to leave a message, or if you want to leave a comment, you can reach me at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram. You can also leave a comment at on the YouTube at I Am Trey Evans when we post the video as well. But as always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.